Hey, folks. Thanks again for joining this Cybersecurity Tech Talk. We're going to be discussing the impacts of one employee, their tech habits, and how it has impact on cybersecurity. I am Joe Rafanelli. I am Technical Solutions Director here at Macrosoft. At Macrosoft, we have a powerful combination of business experience and technological expertise. We provide clients with best-in-class solutions and software development projects. Very excited to reintroduce. We have Todd and we have Scott. They are cybersecurity experts. So Scott is our chief security officer, and Todd is our security consultants. We've had these guys with us for quite a long time here. They have a lot of experience with cybersecurity. They've helped many customers keeping their security side safe, preventing attacks. Gentlemen, I want to welcome you guys once again and thank you for continuing to do these tech talks.
It's good to be here, Joe. These are important topics. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Absolutely. So we're going to get right into it, gentlemen. So how can employees' bad habits and usage of IT assets impact corporate systems?
Yeah, I'll answer that, Joe. There's really two topics that come to mind, right? It's bringing your own devices, whether it's a laptop or a tablet or a cell phone to do corporate work, so to speak, right? Corporate IT, or if you're a smaller shop and you have outsourced IT, you should have your IT team look at your bring your own device assets to make sure that they're secured, right? To make sure that they have safe usage practices, and it's pretty evident, when IT vets out and looks at a machine, that it has the proper malware and the endpoint protection, and that it has proper firewalling when it's used from home, and the like. So bring your own devices. More and more companies are going towards them, because users are used to their own devices. Companies don't want to spend money, on laptops when their workers are work at home. So, there's just a myriad of different reasons, but bring your own devices really add a layer of complexity as far as keeping the corporate network secure. And, if you have the right policies around it, which I think we'll talk about a little bit today, just the right policies and just having the right protection on the machine, the asset itself is just mission critical. And then the second thing that really comes to mind is the employee's habit, their usage of an asset, whether it's a bring your own device or a corporate asset, but more so in a corporate assets, they're using them, they're taking laptops home, and some folks, and people do it, they're doing personal email, personal surfing in the evenings, at the dinner table, or, after, sitting in their home office, and, using non-standard applications or third-party applications that haven't been vetted out by IT, maybe playing the occasional the game, and I've even heard where, a lot of them use it as their personal asset and allow their kids to do their homework on them. And so, it's just having controlled usage on a corporate asset, and it should only be used for business. It shouldn't be used for any personal work whatsoever.
Yeah, Scott, specifically those crossovers, of those personal usage habits into a corporate environment. Those are so risky, right? That is the number one item for such a case. One of the big things that comes to mind when you're talking about that family setting or a public scenario is that people are using their work laptop. They're done working, they get up to go cook dinner or do some family chore, and they leave that machine unlocked and unattended, and it's connected into that corporate infrastructure, sometimes by a VPN, other times maybe just email. And then you get, the kids or a spouse, oh, let me use this laptop because it's right here, and I'm going to go do my homework or, check some email. And a couple clicks later, now we're in a, disaster type scenario here. So that sort of habit is critical to watch for end users. Make sure they're trained not to do that. And then also, in that same space where you've got people reusing passwords on their personal assets, so they're using the same unlock codes on their work laptop as their personal iPhone, or they're reusing their password that they use at shopping places such as Home Depot, Menards, Walmart, Amazon. They're reusing those passwords in their corporate environment instead of separating that corporate and personal life and creating personal passwords for each one. They're doing a lot of overlapping, and then you see all these giant data breaches that are going on with companies, and now their assets are information are stolen, so you end up with compromised work accounts because they reuse the same um, accounts. And then one of the other things that we look at is some of the new stuff that's coming out with AI. That's all the latest trend right now, right? Is everybody's jumping on the AI bandwagon, and you really have to be careful with that, because a lot of the AI that you use, they now have access to the data sets that you feed into that AI. So if you're feeding it, customer or employee data to do something with, that AI, might now retain and have that usage of that data permanently and be able to reuse it for other people using those AI. So it's really critical to get IT approval for any of those AI items that are coming up and people are wanting to use, instead of just going out and doing it on your own and not thinking about it. It's critical to run that by your IT staff.
And that's a great point, Todd. And I want to feed on that. Just one more thing crossed my mind when you said that, is the fact that a lot of people are storing their passwords in their browsers, right? And whether that's on a BYOD, bring your own device, or whether it's on a corporate asset, in doing that, let's just go back to that Home Depot scenario. They saved their Home Depot password into their browser, and now they're using that same password to, I don't know, access corporate email, right? Somebody hooks into their browser and is able to start extracting passwords. That's all it's going to take. And that's why it's mission critical to not have these crossovers of personal life. And honestly, not only personal life, but just that's why you need to have a different password for each individual IT entity that you may, venture out to, whether it's Amazon or corporate IT email or Google Mail.
For sure.
Yeah, guys, great points there. Every time you guys talk about this stuff, I always like, okay, what am I doing in my own personal life? Make sure I get everything changed, passwords, make sure everything's different. But it gets to be like a convenience thing. You know what I mean? It's convenient to have it, but convenience does not protect people. So people should be aware of that. Okay. Are there any specific, I'll go to the next question. Are there any specific types of malware or cyber attacks that are more likely to occur due to poor employee tech habits?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things we see, is phishing,
Hmm.
where people are sending out different types of links via email. And so we see those being compromised, email accounts being compromised at a very high level, whether that's a hosted exchange, a Microsoft 365, or a Google account. All of those type of users are being targeted. And then once they get into one user, they use that email account to send emails to their contacts. And so sometimes those targeted emails might not only come from an outside source, but a trusted outside source. And so if somebody's not really paying attention and looking at the link in the email, hovering over in it, paying attention to where that link actually goes, and then paying attention to the email address of the sender, those people are highly fooled at that point. And so then you get onto a malicious website, and from there they can get credentials, try and compromise MFA. Another big time we see this happen more and more going on is with sponsored search results and sponsored ads on legitimate websites. Even your major search engines such as Google. So somebody types in, a standard search looking for something, and by habit they normally click on the first, one or two items at the highest, search. Well, nowadays, all of these companies have these sponsored search results. And so if I pay money, I can get into those top areas there. And we've seen some of these malicious campaigns do that. So once again, when a user's doing a search, they need to look at those search results, hover over that link, see what website that link is going to, actually checking whether or not it's a sponsored link, and maybe scroll down and look at the actual legitimate search results and not just somebody that's paid money to be there. And then we, as they're clicking on these things or getting to the wrong sites, sometimes they're prompted by corporate antivirus or personal antivirus, or even some of the security that web browsers have put in. They might be getting alerts, that this site, is on a known block list. And instead of going back to their search and going to another site, they just click a link that says, continue to the site anyway, because they don't want to be bothered or be forced to break their train of thought and actually step back and take a look at what they're doing. And so anytime a user is prompted, we want them to take that step back and really look at what they're doing and what the message is telling them, and don't get into that, click first habit. That's the end user's most dangerous habit. And we talked about, using passwords earlier, and overlapping. To reiterate one thing with that is MFA. So, we want to see people using MFA wherever possible, whether that's in their personal environment, banking websites, retirement accounts, government access, Social Security sites. Set up those MFA actions and protect yourself. And then hopefully your corporate office is enforcing MFA at the corporate level. If they're not enforcing it, but you have the option to use it, we really recommend using that. There are a couple schemes out there to still MFA, but to date, it's still one of the best ways to protect you is having that MFA turned on. And then one of the last things we want to look at is just using, unapproved items, whether that's a software, a service, an application, on your corporate assets. You really want to make sure that, you're not letting a kid install a latest video game, or yourself. If you're a gamer, don't put that game on your work computer. Make sure you're putting that on a personal device. If there is ever, a distribution attack through your game vendor, you can infect your corporate laptop, even though you're unintentionally trying to do that. But there's lots of ways that things come in through games and add-ons. And once again, AI, you really need to be careful with those AI services and add-ons and make sure you're using them, the way the corporate has, allowed and put out regulations for.
Yeah, never grab an AI product from the web and just trust it. Just always ask IT. And that's around policies. I mean, you need to make sure that you enforce those policies within your organization, and if the policies are set well for the organization, then a lot of people will say, hey, this is great. Then now they're watching their teenage kids with the gaming, and they're watching it and saying, okay, I'm going to put you on a separate network at home or put you on your own route. There's just a myriad of ways you can protect this. But if corporate kind of enforces good policies, a lot of people just inherently want to do the right thing, and they'll take that home and say, hey, how can I mimic this at home? And then that also gives, some companies we've worked with are actually, as a benefit, so to speak, are handing out, ways to protect themselves, right? They're giving them free LifeLocks and free, endpoint protections and kind of helping the cause too. So, it's a case by case basis, but there's just a myriad of ways. But people want to inherently do good, and they're going to take good ideas home and try to mimic them within their own budgets.
Absolutely, guys. I learned a lot in that last 10 minutes about what not to do. I didn't even realize so much about, when you get to Google search and the company you're looking for is on top, people just click, like Todd had said. You guys got to pay attention. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So again, very, very good, guys. Appreciate
Yeah, don't
all
click
this
first and
information.
ask for forgiveness later.
Exactly.
Pay
Yeah.
attention to the
Yeah. You got
click
to pay
and
attention.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a very, very good point. Everybody's so used to instant gratification,
yeah.
Okay. From a data usage and storage perspective, how can an employee introduce compromise?
Well, I mean, first and foremost is by bringing their own BYOD device that hasn't been vetted out by IT, right, and not fully protected. Now you're landing important data on an unsecure asset, and that's just asking for trouble, right? Copying data to personal drives and key fobs too can be problematic, right? A lot of times you have these nice little key fobs, they fit right in your shirt pocket, and you're at a corporate meeting and you didn't bring your laptop, and somebody's going to give you a file, and you toss over that key fob, and they jack it into a laptop, and bang, it's got an infection because Susie at home used it and got a virus on it.
Yeah.
So you have to control your media. You have to just be cautious of where you're copying that data to, and making sure that it's a 100% trusted source. Don't share external drives at home and then bring them into a corporate environment. That's just a huge don't do. Those are the types of bad ideas. And corporate IT has got their arms around that, but it still happens. It won't happen this one time. Doggone it! I don't want to get up and go into my laptop bag in the kitchen. I'm sitting in a home. Well, I'm going to do it here, and another problem is just copying data from untrusted sources and letting it sit next to trusted data. Be cautious of whatever data you go after and where you get it from. We all do it, right? Even us in security. We're studying things, and we start to download articles, and you're in a hurry, and you have to pay attention to what you're downloading and where that source is. You don't want to land bad data next to good, and it's just. It takes a watchful eye. It's just, as Todd had said earlier, don't click OK inherently past these warnings. Pay attention to the warnings. Watch the corners of your browser. A lot of time it's indicating something's coming. There's that. Don't leave data resident locally on a bring your own device or a corporate device. And when I say that, meaning on the desktop of your hard drive, it's just a bad practice, not only from a security stance, but from a data backup stance. There's so many ways now, if you have on-prem and on-premise server, you definitely are going to have some sort of Active Directory server where you can copy your data, and it's going to be secured, and it's going to be backed up nightly, daily on a regular regimen. And then again, the reverse is true also in Microsoft 365. We have all these wonderful ways to save data now on Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive and file, other file sharing types of utilities. Make sure that when you use those utilities, don't download the free or the Box or Dropbox or the free Google Drive sharing. Make sure it's approved by IT. Make sure IT has oversight of it and that it's controlled. Same thing with Teams and SharePoint. Sometimes folks are using their own OneDrive, and then they bring that and start to pass corporate files across it. Those are all bad things to do, and something bad's going to happen if you continue that practice. It's almost guaranteed that eventually something's going to get intercepted. You're going to hit a ransomware. Something's going to happen. It's just. We've seen so many of those in the last year or so. It's just putting, bad data by good. And never leave your machine unlocked in the office. It's just a bad practice. Don't walk away for lunch or for that next cup of coffee or the water cooler, and then the next thing you come back and your machine's still wide open. It can be compromised pretty easily, or there can be arbitrary deletions. And I've been a victim of that once. When my son was younger and running around the house, and I got up and I took a break to get a cup of coffee, and I came back and my son was, pounding on the keyboard, and, I had a couple of files deleted. So it happens to all of us, and you have to be cognizant that your machine is set to time out after a certain amount of time away that's comfortable, that doesn't prohibit, obviously, your productivity.
Yeah, makes total sense. Pay attention to what you're doing, folks out there, right? There are a lot of bad people out there. So thank you for expanding on that, Scott. I appreciate it. Okay, so the remedies, like what's the best practices a company should consider to help minimize user impact on corporate security?
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit, right? I keep going back to the word policy, and it's mission critical. Every every organization should have a set of policies, small and large, right? If it's a small organization, there are still 20 to 30, just key policies to have, such as a bring your own device policy, acceptable usage policy, endpoint protection, workstation protection policy. Those are just really, really key to have those, right? Just guiding your users, reminding them, just what types of websites to stay away from, and how to check emails, so it's all wrapped around policies, having a good email policy, a good bring your own device policy. Right now we're working with clients. They're like, gosh, AI, it's, I want to use it, and I've got 20 people in the organization that want to use it. And I said, well, that's great, but stand back and think about it, and maybe we should write an AI usage policy and incorporate it into your other standing policies, such as acceptable usage and bring your own device usage, and control the usage of AI, right? It's all, it's not to be control freaks or computer cops, but it's good regulatory control, right? It's making sure that the bad thing doesn't happen, right? And it's pretty simple. And there are tools and utilities and just the right policies, and enforcing those policies, and then educating your users on those policies at a regular interval. I don't mean sending an email every day, hey, you're not supposed to do this, but maybe annually saying, hey, here's our acceptable usage policy. It's been updated for 2024, 2025. Send it out, please. Reach out with any questions. Just make sure it gets in your users' hands. Chances are they're gonna look at it. There are also ways of, if you have already regular training regimens, that you can incorporate, just reiteration, just reminding people, because we're all in a hurry. And like you had said, Joe, it's instant gratification. It's there's a lot of us are being very productive because technology is enabling us to, and we have the habit of full force forward just to get a task accomplished, and just step back and think for a minute.
Yeah, Scott, and one of the things I'll add to that is the user training. I like to hammer that home. If you look at a company, IT is generally outnumbered 1,000 to 1 on employees, and so the dangerous part of your staff is all your employees. So making sure that they're educated on how to protect themselves and the company are the biggest thing you can do. So train those employees, retrain them, and keep training them. That's my motto. And then speaking to Scott's point, making those policies is very important, but it's also making sure that those policies have a procedure to ensure that they're being followed, and then training the users on those policies. So don't just hand them out and okay, everybody read them over. Take a 30-minute training session or an hour training session and go over those critical policies with your staff. You don't have to do that every week, but when you are revising a policy or something important as AI is coming out and becoming so critical, take that 30 minutes to have somebody in IT or in management explain to the users, here's the IT, the AI we're using, here's why we've chosen it, here's why other AI can be dangerous, and just get those points across to the staff. There's a ton of different methods out there for doing that, right? You can have your IT department do all the trainings for you. You can sign up for services. There's a myriad of different online training vendors. Know4 is one of probably the biggest ones that comes to mind right off the top of my head. And those make it easy to get all of these interesting training videos and 5-10 minute sessions out to your users once a week, and then hit them with some tests every so often to make sure that they're digesting all of that information in. And then one of the other big things that we recommend to companies is, don't stop your security practices at the door to your, building or to your services. Go ahead and help out and reach help those employees with their security, so that if you've got people that are bringing BYOD, or you're asking them to use their mobile devices for MFA, offer them some security protections for those devices you're asking them to use. Make sure that they've got good malware protection on those endpoints, protect any assets they're using, but also help them, find a service that's, protecting their personal identities. The more the corporate helps the employee, the more the employee is going to help the corporation, right? The more they know about what's going on, the more protections they have in place. If you've got a very important employee and his identity is compromised, that could be critical to not only the company. It could be an issue with your outfacing identities for the company and your reputation. So we always recommend, if the IT has the ability, or the corporation, is really interested in their employees, to help them out as much as they can with that. Even if it's just adding those type of trainings into the user training, just so that they know those types of services are out there, and what they can go look at to help protect themselves.
Yeah. And it's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that we're starting to see is there are employees that got compromised, and they got compromised personally, and they didn't compromise the corporate environment, but they're not sharing that with the corporate environment, right? So there are data brokers out there that are sucking information from people. There's the dark web once somebody's been compromised, and like it or not, they're going to be able to look at that website and possibly find your email address, especially if you're, in some sort of marketing or some outreach, So there are data brokers that are just sucking information from everywhere. And you need to maybe educate your employees that be cautious of these data brokers, right? They're hitting the court systems. They're hitting the real estate. They're hitting the banks. They're sucking every piece of information on everybody, just so that they have these databases to market to. And these data brokers are marketing your information, as much of it as they can get. A lot of times that may be inaccurate, because, your name is a common name like Mike Smith. Now there's a gazillion Mike Smiths on the planet, and you're the guy who ended up, tied to your Social Security and your, data broker. You're the one with the bad Mike Smith's information. And there are ways and there are tools out there and services that are reasonable, like I'm talking a couple $100 a year, but you can go out there and get your identity cleaned up. So, just educating your users to be cognizant of their identities, just period. So many companies, get breached. My cell phone service got breached, and I get next thing is I get a mailing from them that, hey, we got breached. Your data probably was compromised. And then, I get an email that says we're compromised, and lo and behold, I got a year free of McAfee or LifeLock or some identity theft protection. Consider those, I'm not saying police your users, but, it just quickly in a training session, say, did you know if you have a personal breach, you could bring that to work? We'd be happy to kind of educate you on how to, maybe see if you're on the dark web or in the data brokers. And I think one thing that, we're seeing with a lot of in-house IT now, they're saying, well, I don't want to snoop on my end user environment, but how do I know that they're safe, right? And it's, and you can, they can do dark web scans, and there's ways to dig this information out. And, if you find one of your folks has got a problem, or, if your folks are educated, they'll go look out and see, they'll Google their own name and see if they maybe need a cleanup from a data broker, infestation is what I call it. And it's something to consider.
You guys are sharing so much experience with us. We definitely appreciate this. You can tell that some of the stuff is near and dear to you guys' heart. So it's a lot of good education for folks listening, and to you guys' point, it's something where people should really pay attention. So I appreciate that. Okay. Let me continue. I see it looks like a question is coming up. Let's continue. We have one more question here that we had, and it looks like we have a question coming up from the audience. Okay, so let me continue. What other mechanism or services could a personal user consider to better protect themselves at home?
So, I'd say probably the first thing they can look at, Joe, is their perimeter of their home, right? Their perimeter protection, firewall, router. A lot of customers are signing up with large companies, ISPs, Comcast, Spectrum. There's a myriad of all of those out there, and they give you a firewall a lot of times from them. But those firewalls aren't set up with the tightest security measures, right? They're set up to make things easy for the end user and not impact them. So always going over, those devices from your ISP and making sure that, they're as secure as possible. That's the first part to stop. If you're really concerned with security or performance, then you go with an aftermarket unit that has a lot more security and performance built into it. There's a lot of different products out there that you can go with, and the majority of them out of the box are going to be more secure than your standard service that you're getting from an ISP. And then once again, utilizing that MFA, make sure that you're using MFA on any personal accounts, devices that you have. You can set up MFA at your ISP with your phone provider, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon. All of those major companies offer MFA for their accounts to make sure that your account doesn't get compromised or taken over. So there's a lot you can do with that. And then one of the things that we've touched on a lot of other areas during this is your identity theft and management solutions. Be proactive with that. It's so expensive for an end user to deal with that. A lot of time they're taking time off of work and using vacation time that they should be doing something enjoyable with, that they're having to use to recover from an identity theft problem. And then there's just a huge financial toll it takes, which puts even more stress on the employee and the end user. So it's really helpful to have one of those solutions in place. There's a wide variety of them. Some of them get expensive and people might not have the funds to do that at all levels, but there are some really basic ones out there that watch all of your major credit bureaus and loan services so that nobody can open up a credit card or a bank loan or mortgage without you knowing. There's a lot of other services that go into a lot more protection, but those get obviously more expensive. And I'd say as your personal asset portfolio grows and you become worth more as an individual or a family, that you really want to look into those higher levels of protection. If you're just out of school and you have nothing to your name but a used car, start with those cheap subscription models. But if you're a Fortune 500 CEO, you better have a lot of protection in place. So it's critical to change those as your lifestyle changes.
And there are a lot, and you could ask your ISP, whether it's AT&T or Spectrum, or, it depends where you live in the country and what part of the country you live in as to who's your cable provider or your, the AT&T and CenturyLink. And, there's a gazillion ISPs, but, you can educate your end users at home. They're buying devices such as a Netgear, and Netgear actually has a subscription service. It's $100 a year. It helps you protect your perimeter. It protects every endpoint and every phone that comes into the environment. So, I'm product agnostic, but those are examples, right? Ask your ISP, hey, do you have something that I can add to my monthly bill? $40, $50. That's an all overarching protecting my home. And some of them offer it out of the box too. I think Comcast and Spectrum have, some tiers in there, not to beat it up, but there are ways that they could do it very cost effectively as well.
Very good. Okay, those were the questions I had. As usual, you guys
I
really
see a question out in the chat, Joe. It
Yeah,
says,
I do see. Yeah.
as it's difficult and possible to 100% control personal usage, what is a better corporate device where personal usage is allowed in a very controlled way by IT, or a BYOD environment with controlled access to a corporate environment through VDI and cloud-based corporate services? One thing that I'll answer that. You know, the VDI is a good comment, right? And it's probably bodes, you know, a separate conversation of its own, but there are ways to do that, right? And it depends what your environment is. If you're on-prem and you're already virtualized in-house and on-prem, you could do some VDI desktop type of activities. You can go back to some of the old reliables, whether you're in Active Directory or Azure Directory, where, you know, you set policies and group policies for usage. And again, you know, you have to have some, you know, management utilities, but you can also tighten down and harden the web browsers as to what activity is actually allowed and what types of sites. And there's a myriad of ways to do that, right? And there's some email products, you know, from some of the major vendors that, again, will make, you know, that usage, you know, more clean and more secure. So the VDI is a great way to go. I'd love to get a conversation with the person that wrote this question, because I think it bodes, you know, maybe 15 minutes, half hour of our time. And there's just a myriad of ways, right? If you're in AWS, then you have workspaces. So there's a product for that anymore. And if you're in-house or if you're cloud hosted. So, you know, it's a great question. You know, workspaces in AWS is basically a VDI, and, you know, Microsoft has its own offering too. And it's a great concept. It's a great idea. On a BYOD, it's a little harder. You know, I think that, you know, that becomes a conversation that delves into HR a little bit and how you control those devices. But you could certainly, you know, even if you extend some of your own endpoint protection, there's, again, ways to harden that as well. When you start to get into detection and response type of applications, those can be very useful on a BYOD.
Yeah, and one of the things, you know, I'll add to that just from a technical side, because I'm used to setting that stuff up on the technical side, right? So the VDI can offer segregation, right? So you can let somebody on a BYOD connect to a VDI, and that's going to give you some segregation. How you connect to that VDI is very critical. So if you're connecting to that VDI over a VPN that is unrestricted, you're now opening up that VDI environment to just as many vulnerabilities, you know, with a BYOD. So that connection is very critical. And then locking down those VDIs once you're on them is critical. So, you know, and then all of that comes back to budget, right? You know, most of the companies that are using or wanting to look at BYOD are doing that for budget reasonings. And the VDI, you know, has to be factored into, you know, that corporate budget, you know, and so those are the main three things, you know, we look at from a technical side.
Very good. Thanks, gentlemen.
I see one more question in there, Joe. I'm sorry. What are some examples of effective cybersecurity policies that address employee behavior? I want to make sure I answer, you know, the questions that I see come through in the chat. Yeah, mission critical, right? Bring your own device policy. A lot of companies just don't think of that, but with the evolution of COVID and the remote work, you know, space nowadays, very, very critical. Bring your own device policies. Up, you know, your endpoint protection policies, and that probably should kind of parlay into a workstation policy. Network usage policies that not only talk about how you use the corporate network when you're in the office, but also how you use networking when you're a work at home individual, and certain policies wrapped around home wireless usage and home internet usage, and some of the protection mechanisms should be written into that as well. And then, you know, now any policy and acceptable use policies, those are critical too. And all of the above should have some sort of simple language wrapped around usage of AI that it absolutely must be vetted out by and approved by corporate IT and corporate management.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
Scott, you know, one thing I would say to add to that is your data storage and data usage policies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of times companies overlook, you know, making sure they're telling employees where they can store data, what type of data, and how long it should be kept for. You know, so that's critical. You know, if you're, you know, an all-in 365 company and you have 20 different SharePoint sites, the user's got to make sure that they're putting the right data in the right site. So for that data usage policy is really important too, and that you've got somebody, going through your sites and your data every so often and making sure that those policies are being followed.
Makes sense, guys. Okay, we got another question here. In what ways can employee training and awareness programs be improved to address specific tech habits, risks?
Um, well, that's a great question, and I think Todd covered training, and there's a couple of approaches, right? If it's in house, then you add it to your training regimen. Whether it's delivered by, the corporate educational department, HR, or IT. Um, you know, you can do some cheat sheets and circulate those, and reminders within email. So constant reminders. It's just newsletters, emails. Corporate outings. When you have a corporate outing, getting 10-15 minutes to just talk about employee safety, employee training and awareness, right? Again, if it's a corporate outing, if it's a meeting, you can certainly get some time in there, but sending constant reminders, right? Even if you deliver them as a message upon login, it's like, hey, Tuesday is Cybersecurity Day. Did you know? You can do some of these events that don't make it so sanitary, and they make it a little bit fun for the user, and it distracts the user for a minute to a good way, and that they say, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm glad they said that, right? So, the tip of the day type of thing, or the email, the secure tip of the week, or, did you think of, or just reminding you. So constant reiteration of the information. And then if you have a subscription service, that actually delivers training, that you set up training regimens through and deliver those, you can customize many of those, and then add in things that are specific to your environment, specific to your policies.
Yeah, and one thing I would add to that is just to make sure that there's some sort of structure set up for that, right? So that you have somebody that is doing that on a regular basis. We find that the biggest issue is that companies, they get into it, they do it good for a month or two, and then the person's job who is to be doing that, he falls off, and they don't do any trainings for a month or two, and then they're back on for a month. And when you have that big up and down in between those notifications and those meetings and those trainings, the users just they don't take in as much as they should. Like Scott said, if there's a daily notification on login, or a weekly or bi-weekly email sent out that's covering the latest trends and the biggest things in the news, that's where we see the users tend to be a lot more interested. When you can correlate your training to what's going on in the environment around them, it really brings that home for the end user and employee, and they really tend to digest that training way better.
Consistency is key, and we've even had companies that have done cybersecurity employee of the month, where they'll give a $25 Amazon gift card for somebody who just excelled, or caught something and brought it to IT's attention. So there are different ways that you can make this less rigid, less directive, and more fun. And it's a good topic, and people, my wife, my son, and my son's in junior high school. He comes to me, Dad, I want to be safe. What can I do? Everybody's thinking about it. So I think now's a perfect time, and where we are in our evolution technologically, that people are really starting to think about this, and now's a good time. That was a great question. I really appreciated it. And, if you throw that into the corporate mix, I think right now it's going to be accepted at all levels, and even up to the management suites.
Oh, yeah, good point. Awareness is key. Okay, another chat question. What role do companies' policies play in shaping employees' tech habits?
Well, as I think, as I said a little bit earlier, is those policies from the corporate are making them do it at work and on work assets and with the work environment, right? Whether it's a BYOD or a work owned asset. It's enforcing them to think about it, right? And they're going to take those practices from those policies at work. They're going to take them home and say, gosh, you know what? I should be watching my email, my ISP supplied email, my Yahoo mail, my Outlook mail, my MSN mail, all these old, public mail systems, Google, Gmail, it makes them think, and they'll start practicing that at home too. If it works at work, and they're, they'll be driving home from work, or, taking a moment and saying, why are we having to do that? Gosh, maybe I should do that at home. So it does cross over. It's pretty transferable. It's amazing what you'll see.
Right. These are all great questions. Are there any other chat questions, or maybe we'll close the meeting? Let's give it a couple seconds here. All right, I don't see anything else. Okay, guys, thanks so much for your expertise and your knowledge about this topic. Obviously, you guys have years of experience with this. It comes out every time we guys, speak with us, so we do appreciate it. Folks on the chats, again, excellent questions. It really brought to light a lot of other things that we didn't cover initially, so that was great. And guys, by sharing this information, you're just reducing risk for everybody, corporations, personal. So we're doing a nice service here at this point. If folks didn't get a chance to, connect with us or ask any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on the Macrosoft website. So it's macrosoftinc.com. You see my contact information there. We can get you connected with Scott and Todd if you have any other questions, and kind of go through your cybersecurity needs, and then we're happy to do that. But for now, I want to thank everybody, and have a good day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care.